Welcome, everybody. My name is Enrique Figueroa. I'm the President Pro Tem of our Faculty Senate. And I want to again thank you for being here this afternoon to listen to our Chancellor's plenary session. With that, I'm not going to say much other than to welcome and introduce our Chancellor, Mark Mone.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Appreciate that introduction, Enrique. And I was going to say, boy, it's fall again, but all of a sudden it's summer again. So it's hard to figure this weather out, but let's take it while we can. And I welcome you all to our fall plenary. And what I'd like to do today is, as the slide title suggests, talk about actions that are both underway and really emphasize a lot of the changing context and establish some of the very clear direction that shows the continuity with what we've been doing, but also in the changing environment within which we find ourselves, some of the new directions that are important for us to pursue. I'll start, as is typical with the plenary, with some updates, some things that since I've met with you and talked about these in the last plenary, but also even since we've had communications from the last spring, I'd like to share with you a few highlights. And I'll start with our comprehensive campaign, where we had the public launch on Monday night for the most ambitious campaign in the history of UW-Milwaukee. We announced a $200 million goal. We had previously had a working goal of $175 million. And we were able to announce on Monday night that we're 32% above already the previous record campaign of $125 million established in 2008. This is phenomenal. And I want to give credit to not only our Vice Chancellor, Pat Borger, for development and alumni relations, but her entire team and all of you. Because it's the relations, it's the faith that the community has in the work that you do from the education, research, and community engagement spheres that really make us successful in that regard. It was a wonderful night. I encourage you to look at. There's at least 3 different media articles that have come out from the Business Journal, Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and Business Times, as well as probably other outlets. But just wonderful coverage of this, and it's really a great tailwind for us to have. So thank you for that, for enabling us to achieve that. Some other highlights, and I'll work on this slide from left to right, top to bottom. I'll start with the fact that our team at the Zilber School of Public Health, led by Interim Dean Ron Perez, has achieved the first time for any school of public health in the state of Wisconsin to be accredited. Let's give them a round of applause for this incredible accomplishment. Way to go. I just shared this picture. I was out this afternoon for a opening of the WEDC board, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, and I showed the same picture that's in the top in the middle. Secretary Hogan is one of the individuals in the picture. We have the Lubars, who gave us a $10 million gift that was matched by a $10 million gift from the state of Wisconsin through the UW system, which we've added to with almost $4 million in additional fundraising to establish an endowment for our Lubar Entrepreneurship Center. This is important because it cuts across every school and college and provides opportunities for entrepreneurial, innovative thinking that all our students, whether they become entrepreneurs or not, really pick up a lot of remarkable skills and are more valuable for anything that they want to pursue in life. On the top right, you see some strategic enrollment management highlights, some of the great enrollment numbers, some firsts, and remarkable accomplishments in the context that we face. As we just walk through some of these, what you can see, new Wisconsin freshmen are up 4%. Secondarily, the new Illinois freshmen are up 8%. I need to put this in the right context. This is with a lot of Wisconsin schools today experiencing significant enrollment declines. Many UW institutions, and we won't name names, the final numbers are not out, but there's some significant enrollment challenges. So for us to do this with the headwinds that we face is a true accomplishment. We have, since I've been chancellor, been working on retention and graduation rates, and I'm pleased to report that we have a historic high today of 74% first to second year retention, and even more dramatic, in 1 year we've gone from 61.2 to almost 68% for African American graduation or retention rate. This is a remarkable step in 1 year to have achieved, and we're going to keep that momentum going. So these are some highlights in terms of the enrollment management picture. On the lower left, meet Pat Baldwin. Pat is our new men's head basketball coach, recently hired from Northwestern. He was one of the top assistant coaches in the basketball world, NCAA, and we're just delighted to have him on board. If you've had the opportunity to hear him speak, and he's been around in the community, been on campus in a number of different settings, he's a dynamo, and I know you'll enjoy meeting him, working with him, and our students are very excited to have him coaching. Also on the sports front, our women's soccer team remains undefeated. They did tie with Green Bay last night, a little scary, but it's remarkable the run that they're on, and just great athletics. Sierra Magazine recently announced that UW-Milwaukee is among the top 50 coolest schools. I have to tell you, for our students today, this is critically important. This type of sustainability, eco-literacy is such an important draw. So that's wonderful for us. It really builds on the work that Kate Nelson has led around sustainability with a great team across campus that has put us last year in the top green universities. We're one of 7 Department of Education campuses to have achieved a Green Ribbon Award. Again, great momentum on this. On the bottom right-hand side, it was less than a month ago that we were notified that we had received top 25 status of LGBT-friendly campuses across the country. If you look at the list of top 25 campuses, you'll see we're in great company. We were in the top 30 last year. Prior to that, we were in the top 50. So given the headwinds that exist in our society with respect to a number of LGBT issues, which I'll talk about later, this is a great, great achievement. So those are some highlights. Those are some quick updates. There's many more. At different points in my plenary, I'll talk about some of the other updates and some of the other accomplishments along the way, but I'd like to start out with some of those areas. The heart of the plenary today is around a framework called actions, context, and actions. So outcomes, context, and actions. I'm going to go through each of these, so don't worry about the eye chart aspect, but right now, let me just say at the heading level, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to start with the outcomes, or why UWM is so important and why it matters. I want to ground us in that perspective, because then it's going to make more sense when I talk about, given the changing context, given a number of different environmental factors, how important it is for us to continue to have this type of impact. And then finally, somewhat illogically you might say, I'm going to actually talk about the action plans and some of the things that are underway and how we're continuing to make progress. And I'll explain more about this framework, but I want to just do a little something different to start with the big so what. What if there was no UWM? If you look at some of the almost clinical, kind of the statistic level ways of evaluating what's UWM about, the numbers you might be familiar with at the aggregate kind of macro level, but let's just review them real quickly. If we didn't have UWM, there'd be 180,000 fewer graduates from a Research One institution that's engaged in putting high-quality students out at an accessible price point that you only achieve in public higher education. This is huge. I can't stress that enough. This is a door that's opened that simply wouldn't exist in the urban environment we know as Milwaukee. Most recently, we had 5,642 graduates. Think about that. It's larger than many private and many other state institutions, public or private. It's phenomenal in terms of the scale and the scope, but importantly, the quality. R1, Carnegie Engaged University, and numerous awards in every school and college. Truly crown jewels. So to have that, it's a phenomenal place to be. In the last 5 years, almost 30,000 graduates, over 28,000, $59 million in research expenditures that I'm going to talk about in a little more detail in terms of the impact, but in aggregate, even over the last decade, that's more than $500 million in research that fuels this region, but more importantly, enables us to have the types of labs, to hire the faculty, to be able to support the postdocs, to be able to do the things that a research enterprise is all about. And there's over 1,500 different entrepreneurial types of contacts through Student Startup Challenge, the I-Corps, and a number of other engagements that we have that are making a huge difference. So that's the high level, if you will, the kind of the statistical overview. What I'd like to do is drill into this a little bit more at the personal level. And let me just share a little bit. I'm going to turn this off and just tell you a little bit about what I see as the impact. Let's start with students. I've had the fortune over the last year to get to go to over a dozen different locations around the country. We've celebrated our 60th anniversary, and we've been really rallying a lot of our alumni engagements. The alumni continue to tell me how important their time at UWM was, the inflection points that they experienced in their time here. Some of us went to Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago, and we had a VIP alumni event. These were a dozen individuals who've achieved great accomplishments in their lives. Louis Arriaga, as an example, is somebody who has been a career diplomat, 8 different diplomatic assignments. He's taken on a new appointment as the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Guatemala. He's about to leave. He told his story, and I can tell you a number of individual stories, but let me tell you one that said it and picked up a theme that so many people have talked about there and across the country, as well as in alumni events here. An 80-year-old gentleman, 80-plus-year-old gentleman said, "Everything that I've accomplished in my life is because of UWM." It was one of the most powerful statements, and the stories that we heard that night, everybody outdid themselves. And I want to share that with you because you've made that difference. You've made that kind of impact through the quality of the teaching, the research, the care, the nurturing that we do in terms of taking people where they can look back and say, the most important things in my life have been realized because of what happened at UWM. On the research front, every single one of our schools and colleges, and by the way, this is where I get in trouble because you were waiting for me to talk about your school or college or your area. In the interest of time, I'm not going to do them all, but think about them and think about areas in whatever area. If we think about in the health area, and yeah, we have a lot of things going on in health, not just in 4 schools and colleges that have health in their name or their central thrust, but health is happening in a lot of places on campus. I think about how the mom who's been ravaged by nighttime agitation with Alzheimer's and the multi-million-dollar grant that our researchers are having in terms of the impact to help solve that. If you've ever had a family member that has had Alzheimer's, you can appreciate the importance of that. I think about in the College of Engineering where we have self-healing turbines for green power that are able to have much more sustainability and eco-friendly environments. We think about in our work that we do in transportation, in education, in the arts, and across the vast array of fields that happen. And it's dramatic, the life-changing differences that occur because of the research. But it's more than just individuals. It's families, it's organizations, it's entire societies. The issue about engagement. I challenged you last year as a campus to go beyond the 43,000-hour average that we've achieved for many years in terms of service learning from our faculty, staff, and students. And you responded because of the 60th anniversary to more than 60,000 hours. We achieved 66,000 hours, which is phenomenal. And that's just a mark of the service contributions and why so many of us have come to UWM and continue to contribute in so many ways above and beyond what we might normally be seen as doing in our so-called job descriptions. So that's what I think of when I think about at a deeper level than just what the statistics might impart. But you know, there's some folks who can tell this story better than me, and I'd like you to hear a few of their stories.
We have 2 kids, a 5-year-old named Wesley, and we have an almost 2-year-old Bay. We did everything backwards. Started dating, and then we lived together. Then we had Wesley, then we got married, and then we decided to go to college. Probably the most challenging thing about being a parent in school is balancing work and family and a full-time school load. It's hard to remind yourself that, you know, what your end goal is.
There have just been so many times where we could have quit, and we've just struggled through it and pushed through it by supporting each other.
UWM has something called the UWM Life Impact Program, and I would not be sitting here today talking with you if it wasn't for that program. It's everything you need as a student parent. The emotional and community support that they provide you is just second to none.
From day one, they welcomed me and let me know that I was a part of the Life Impact community as well. And they brought me in and definitely made me feel like I was a part of UWM.
We wanted a job that was meaningful, and teaching, it's like, what other profession can you walk in the door every day and have the opportunity to make a positive impact on a child's life? We set a goal when Wesley was born that we wanted to graduate by the time he was 5, and he just turned 5 in February. To set a goal and to reach that goal is just the greatest feeling in the world, and something that we're both very proud of.
I've always had a love for animals just because I think they're such defenseless creatures and they don't really have a voice. I was born in Bogota, Colombia, where I lived till I was 10 years old, and then I moved to St. Paul, Minnesota. Being exposed to, 2 different cultures gave me an open mind about things. It gave me a different perspective on life. I came to UW-Milwaukee because I saw the many opportunities the university offered me as a student. I saw the opportunities in research. The biggest accomplishment that I've had at UWM is definitely being able to start the pre-veterinary medicine organization. It's my little treasure that I hold on to because now I help 30 members get involved in research and get internships in the veterinary medicine field or jobs. That's something that I'm very proud of. I work at Lakeshore, veterinary specialist. I feel like this experience is preparing me for what I'm gonna end up doing in the future. This internship has definitely helped me find my way and has affirmed my, my passion for veterinary medicine.
A year ago, I didn't know where my life was gonna go. I left and went to work as a mail carrier. I was doing something because I had to, not because I wanted to. I didn't think I would be successful anymore, just because life hit me and was like, you can't. Wow. I thought my life was done. School it wasn't an option anymore, and the success that I wanted, I couldn't achieve, so. When that door finally opened, it was kind of do or die for me. And I made sure I did everything I could to succeed. IT United and UWM every year puts on a career fair for high school students. I was able to be an ambassador for that. And I really connected with Jennifer Anderson at Manpower Group. I had a phone interview and they gave me the job on the spot. And the next day I went to my post office and gave them my 2 weeks notice. I was in the Commons, and the Commons is this 10-week startup for students and companies. Through that, they also have a program where they partner with Coles and they select 10 students from the Milwaukee area. They flew us out to New York, and they pretty much wanted us to innovate for them. They liked my ideas, they liked me, and they wanted me to do an interview. So in March, I accepted the offer to work at Coles as a full-time software engineer. It's nice to just see that with hard work, with dedication, with drive, if you still have that fire to be successful, you can be successful.
Don't they tell our story well? And I have to give credit to our exemplary team that puts these videos together. It's so nice to have the great quality that we have, just like so many other areas of our faculty and staff and students, the qualities here. So I'm going to shift gears now, given that context, given that statement of the impact, and really talk about the changing context. And there's a number of contextual variables that I could talk about, but I want to stress some that are most directly affecting us historically, but especially now and certainly into the future. How each of these we could spend an awful lot of time on, and they're so important for us to understand, because as the context changes, we too have to continue changing, continue evolving, and be there to meet that changed future. And you'll see exactly what I mean when I talk about any one of these, and that's what I want to stress. Any one of them has profound implications for us. And when you put them all together, they really do add up to be significant in terms of what the impact on us is. So one of them that's quite prominent, I think you can appreciate the impact, as the perceptions of the value of a college degree declines, what that means for us in terms of our responsibility to continue to stress, much like you saw perhaps on Sunday in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, a full-size editorial from the president of Wisconsin Independent Colleges and University, Rolf Wagenke. And he addressed this type of poll that we're seeing increasing studies about that are out there, where people are asking fundamental questions about, do you need a college degree today? I just had a discussion this afternoon with members of the legislature that are members of the board that I addressed, and they asked, where are we at in this state? What are you doing, and how can you help address what they already see as we lag the nation in terms of percentages of individuals that have college degrees? And what does that position us for as a state in terms of attracting companies, in terms of being able to provide current employers with the talent that they need? So this is significant. And this is something that we know the Department of Education continues to empirically support, that the lifetime earnings differential is $1 million between a high school and a person with a 4-year degree. And as you go up in education, especially with the master's degree, things do start to asymptote a little bit after that in terms of different income levels. Trudy's saying down. but that is well established in terms of the correlation with income. But more than income, it's about quality of life, it's about doors that are open, it's about what kind of society do we create with more educated individuals. What in a democracy do we really want to have in terms of a charitable, compassionate, and understanding community that is achieved through education? That, to me, is one of the big values of education. It's sure a path, it's a key, but it's more fundamental. Technology has a lot of aspects, doesn't it? We can think about the cost of technology, both for users, but us as a university. I think if we asked Robin right now, I think just for maintenance, just to keep us going, we would be looking at somewhere between $8 and $9 million we need this year, just for maintenance, just to keep our IT infrastructure where it is. And I'm not talking about advances. I'm not talking about the millions of dollars that it took us to get Wi-Fi in all of our buildings and across the campus. The cost of technology is immense in terms of what it requires for us to provide support for labs and teaching and research enterprise. There's also the issue of, as more and more students go through K-12 with much more exposure to learning online, the expectations that creates, as well as the market opportunities for us to create new ways to access those 750,000 adults with some college, 2 or 4 year attempts, but no actual degree. So this is opportunities for us in the future, but there's a lot of facets of technology. Demography is our destiny, some would argue. Whether you believe that or not, demography has huge impacts. From the employer side and from our side, let me share with you an interesting slide that I've been exposed to as I've been doing a lot of work with a regional talent workforce team that the governor charged us to be part of in terms of addressing a lot of the needs that we have for existing employers and with the addition of what we anticipate with Foxconn coming to this region. A lot of data on this screen. I just ask you to think about the one area that's circled and the one line that the arrow points to. And that's the number of high school graduates in the Midwest. Not specific to Wisconsin, just in general in the Midwest. This is national data, the most recent data from what's called WICHE, Western Interstate Commission for Higher Ed. This data shows, at best, the Midwest is flat. In fact, in some areas, it's actually declining in terms of high school graduates. We know that in Wisconsin, since 2010, we've had 1,200 fewer high school graduates, and we're starting with a baseline of less than 70,000. So work those numbers down, and the population is shrinking. And in higher education today, public or private in Wisconsin, there is a lot more hunger for a smaller body. And that's what I meant when I talked about enrollments at other state and private institutions that's down in Wisconsin for freshmen. So this bodes well for us, but it's difficult. This is a significant headwind. If you're wondering, sometimes I joke, if we had UW-Houston or UW-Dallas, that's that top line, the South. The South is where there's tremendous growth still. In fact, in the West, that's the blue line above us. Good prospects or better. And then the bottom line is the Northeast. There's an article that came out in the Atlantic this summer, and it talked about the fact that we're running out of teenagers in higher education. And that's a great phrase, we're running out of teenagers. Let me underscore that by talking about Wisconsin data in particular. If this doesn't grab you and show you some of the reasons why there's concern among employers and educators in this state, this is very concerning. Take a look at this census data, 2010 versus 2040. The deltas that we're talking about are the far right-hand side, the type of growth. 0 through 17, 2%, 18 to 64, our space, 0.4, less than 0.5% growth. But look at where the significant growth is in terms of demographics. Yikes. Clinical term, yikes, right? This is a watch out. You know, if you think about this, 95% of the growth is 65 plus. Running out of teenagers, running out of employees, running out of, you know, this is the specific projection for us based on U.S. Census data. So what does that translate into? Clearly, enrollments are influenced by this. And let's talk for a moment about enrollments at the big level. The first line up here talks about the correlation, the relationship between our enrollments and our revenues. And let me clarify one thing. 85% of our operating budget is based on student-driven enrollment-related numbers. In other words, 16% of our operating budget comes from the state. So we really need to be thinking about enrollment as a front and center activity for everybody on our campus and how we all contribute to enrollment, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But if we increase our enrollments, every percent year over year is another $2 million in base budget. The saw, though, cuts the other way as well, and that's what we've experienced since 2010, is that with enrollment declines close to 31,000 today at about 24,500, give or take 100, because enrollment numbers are not exact at this point, that has obvious implications. So we're expecting right now, and the enrollment numbers will be final next week, about 2.5%, 2.4% decline. But in fact, compared to what we had projected and anticipated, given some of the other enrollments that are double-digit declines that we're seeing across different UW schools and some of the privates, some of the grave concern, and you've heard perhaps across some of the schools, you know, some of the actions that are now being taken as a result. This is actually a relief and something that we feel more positive about than we would have. Some of the bright spots in here include, as you can see, some of the specifics, the growth in the new freshmen overall by 4%, and that's our future, but it takes many years. Think about our freshman class size, 3,400 against an overall enrollment of 25,000, so it's much more than just the freshman size. It's returning students and transfers that really make the bulk of our enrollment. Increase in underrepresented students by almost 5%. Again, future demographic trends and current ones. And then increase in new masters by almost 10%, and a modest decrease in international students of 3%. Now, why is that a bright spot? Since about the last 6 to 8 months, with some of the executive orders and travel bans that have come out, many leading universities, research, top reputation schools beyond UWM have anticipated as much as a 20 or 30% decline, and some have been experiencing deep into the double digits international enrollment declines. For us only to have dropped this much is actually a win. So again, it's against that broader context that we have to evaluate things. State and federal budgets, obviously, huge. Our capital budget is entirely reliant, almost entirely reliant upon state funding. We have great philanthropy that helps contribute to that, but it's a huge lift for the state, as you know. Overall, I want to state that the budget that we have today, that was signed by the governor recently, is the best budget that UW system has had in more than a decade. That's got to be stressed, and that's a good thing. It doesn't begin to make up for the cuts. It doesn't begin to make up for enrollment declines. It doesn't begin to make up for some of the tuition freeze and other factors, but it is a great outcome compared to what could have been the case, and that's what we have been lobbying for and working incredibly hard. One of the big components of this that I've been lobbying as one of the top priorities for all of us is the compensation plan, and we have for next year 2%, and then early in 2019 another 2%. We need to be working on getting our merit and evaluations and that we've been communicating about. But this is great. Now, the full story is 30% of that does need to be funded by UWM. So it's not entirely funded by the state, and we're going to continue to do that. The capital budget, great news on a number of dimensions. One, Northwest Quad and Sandberg Towers, getting additional funding for those to the tune of about $88 million. Two, we have a number of other system schools that got large projects approved very late in the budget cycle. Why are other campuses getting big projects good for us? Because if we think ahead, in capital budget, you're always thinking ahead, 5 to 6 budget cycles at least. We have the chemistry building and the union building as major projects. And if we did not get other projects approved throughout the system, it's very unlikely that when our turn comes up in the next 2 biennial budgets, when we want to put those forward, that we'd have much of a chance of getting those. Third, $100 million in all agency state funding, which will be a pool from which we can try to get some of the funds for projects that we did not get in terms of some of the stopgap measures for chemistry, engineering, and some of the other needs that we have on campus, including the IT infrastructure. On the accountability and performance funding side, that's still being determined because while the legislature said we're going to go a different direction than what we had been planning at the UW system level, the regents are now working on developing a plan with the UW system in terms of how we will have an array of metrics. We don't know what the final number is. We don't know how this will work, but what I've been sharing this summer with the governance groups and some other leadership groups on campus, that has now been changed in the last week to 2 weeks. And so we're looking at this, and it does appear to be that we will be able to continue to compare ourselves to peer institutions across a number of different institutions, a number of different metrics, which is certainly preferable comparing ourselves across the entire UW system, given our different missions, geography, and student profiles. On the federal budget side, obviously there's still a lot to be determined. We know that the Senate has until December to determine the final budget go-rounds, but on the House side, the House passed approval for basic research and other research funding that's actually almost a 3% increase. Compare that to the administration projected cut of 17%. So we feel really good about that. We've been lobbying extremely hard. But as I said, the Senate still has to work through their spending bill. I'm very concerned, and I think all of us should be concerned on behalf of our students, about the Perkins Loan Program. That is set to expire over this weekend. 13,000 some odd students in the UW system participate in a Perkins Loan Program. This has an awful lot of low interest loan and deferral. It's one of the key mechanisms, and we're one of the higher percentage schools in terms of participation in this because of our student body and the access and research mission that we have on our campus. So that's a point of concern at the federal budget level. The other aspects with respect to context, and the last slide that I'm going to share with you is one that I'm going to actually drill into with a little more detail, because these are not only important, but they do get into some really detailed requirements for explanation. Under the heading of safety and inclusion, the first area is around DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And you know that Attorney General Sessions announced the end of DACA, giving Congress 6 months to figure out how to proceed. I will state straight up front, you've seen my campus communication, you've heard me talk about this in interviews on TV and on the radio. We wholly support all our dreamers, everybody enrolled at UWM, and the continuation of the DACA program. I've written directly to President Trump. I've not only written, but I've had conversations with the entire, not conversations with the entire Wisconsin delegation, congressional, but I've had letters to them all, and I've talked to a number of them personally about this. On our campus, the Roberto Hernandez Center, the Inclusive Excellence Center, and the Undocumented Student Work Group has been providing ongoing support and information for all our affected students, as well as faculty and staff who wish to help. And I hope you all do. When I visited with the Undocumented Student Task Force, and when I visited with the Advisor Network, one of the things that they often will tell me is how important it is to have faculty and instructional staff who can help, who understand with empathy what our students and their families are going through. And it's so important to have that type of knowledge and where to send individuals. So for example, we host and provide clinics for individuals to get local immigration attorneys who can provide that detailed information that they are asking and wondering about. So I want to acknowledge that all these programs and initiatives have my and our senior leadership, campus leadership, full support, and I applaud these efforts to support our students in this time of uncertainty. With respect to Title IX, if you've been following this, this is a particularly important area affecting campuses across the nation, with the U.S. Department of Education recently repealing the existing guidance that we'd had, the Dear Colleague letter, and has issued interim guidance until formal rulemaking can take place. So I'm going to work off of a script of an email that I sent the campus. If you've seen that, I apologize. You'll hear some repetition here, but I want to use this opportunity to make sure everybody knows a few things. First, our policies have been formalized through a Wisconsin administrative code. So we're operating the same way. This guidance being changed does not change our behavior. Second, these policies that we have today provide the required due process, and we'll see if any changes are required once new federal regulations are passed. Regardless, though, of those federal actions, we remain committed as a safe campus and are pleased to have added a full-time victim advocate, and will also be bringing on a full-time standalone Title IX coordinator in the next few weeks. This, obviously, I wouldn't be spending this much detailed time if it was not an important issue, one that we will remain entirely committed to. We're going to address this head on. On the transgender rights area, in light of recent proposed legislation banning transgender individuals in the military, and earlier this year, the repealing of federal guidelines and guidance on the rights of transgender students, I want to reaffirm our institutional commitment to being a welcoming place for LGBT+ students, faculty, staff, and their allies. On the last category around free speech and hate speech, yesterday we kicked off our Freedom of Expression series. I want to thank Joan Prince, our Vice Chancellor for Global Inclusion and Engagement, for putting an event together with Clarence Page, the moderator, and 8 other panelists who just did a remarkable job. Faculty, staff, students, community members, and others who have viewed this have been nothing but positive about it. In fact, the negative complaint that I've heard from is there a positive complaint? The negative that I've heard from 2 individuals is, I wish we'd had more time. What a great way to start the series, of which we'll have at least 4 different targeted events for really enabling this campus to have civil discourse, respect, civility, greater awareness, and an educated, open environment where we can really get into the issues and understand roles, responsibilities, and ways that we can have a campus that leads in this area. So I'm delighted to have this session launch in such a powerful, positive way. I understand there were 2,800 people who live streamed, as well as 400 to 450 people who were in attendance. So that's a great turnout to start with. You know, overall, this campus has a long history of support and advocacy for all our diverse employee, student, community populations. We're a top 25 LGBT+ campus, highest percentage of first-generation students, 40%, students of color, military veteran students, more than any in Wisconsin. And this is our strength. It has been and will continue to be even more. So I'm committed to this as a personal as well as an institutional value. And the safety, inclusion, and well-being are among our top priorities for all. So with that as context, let me shift into the ultimate horror chart in terms of something that really is difficult. And I'm going to just give a snapshot of the headings, and then I'm going to talk about this a little bit further in detail. What you see here in terms of actions and strategic opportunities, this is a framework that's consistent with what I've been sharing with different governance groups and especially different leadership groups at retreats that we've had this summer that have included governance group leaders. This is an outgrowth. Before I turn this off, let me just say there's no surprises here. This is around the pie chart. You see outstanding learning environment, you see research excellence, and you see building the talent pipeline and achieving an outstanding student learning environment. So let me turn this off for a moment and talk about where this comes from and where we're going. In 2011, we started campus strategic planning. We had not undertaken a strategic plan and a comprehensive effort in some time. That work established a number of different groups, and this builds on that. You know that group was working for a few years, and in 2014, and particularly 2015, we hit the most significant budget cuts the UW system has ever faced as a percentage and in absolute dollars. And we formed COET, which was a group that had a lot of individuals and it had a lot of engagement with the campus to continue to determine how will we face these extreme cuts. I'm very proud of the leadership that we've had through that time. Our provost, Vice Chancellor Robin Van Harpen, have done an incredible job helping lead and manage budget in a way that has been difficult to deal with, but has avoided some of the challenges that we see in other academic institutions today, and has avoided some of the instability that we otherwise would have had. So thank you for that. But today, and over the last year, we formed a group called the Chancellor's Strategic Opportunities Work Group. And this group has engaged the campus and identified not only these 3 areas, but within them, some of the critical priorities. And there are existing groups that have helped us identify what are the top priorities, things that we're working on, and some aspects around future investments. How will we meet the changing context of the future and the current contextual factors that have changed? So for each one of these, as I go through them, because what I'd like to do is take that slide and really break it down into 3 different areas and talk about some of the key actions. We have work groups that are engaged. So the things on the slide, we've talked about outcomes at the bottom. We've talked about the context. So now I'm going to go into each of these particular areas and flesh them out just a little bit. Under outstanding learning environment, this is where it's all about the students, and it is so foundational. As I mentioned earlier, this is the heart of our revenue, but it's also the raison d'etre. It's what we're here for. It's absolutely critical in terms of that transformative experience and what we all value so much. Improving retention and graduation rates, I've shared with you some of the numbers, but how have we gotten there? What are some of the things that we will continue to invest in? High impact practices in terms of retention plan activities have been vital. We've got a significant plan and a work group that has been addressing this for some time. We've added, thanks to UW System, targeted funds in this area. We have $3.7 million that we've got for a 3-year support from UW System around advisors. We have student stipends, $3.3 million that we've got from funding specifically from UW System to help us address this. This is for emergency financial assistance given from our UW System funds. That enables us to help close the achievement gap. Achievement is a challenge when you have an access university, and we need to continue to close that gap, and I'm so thrilled that I was able to report to you today in my opening updates the progress that we've made in one important category, which is the African American first year to second year retention, and we're going to continue to make those same kind of strides with these types of targeted efforts. It's great. A big piece of this is English and math reform. I don't know if you knew this or not, but it's not been that long ago that UWM had 50% of our students incoming that were categorized, qualified, tested as needing remedial math and or English. Other UW institutions, 4-year institutions, have about a 20% rate. Nationally, the 2-year rate is about 20% or 50%. So if you think about that, we're in as an access university, we're in that challenging area to support all the things we do for research, but also provide assistance and to really stress how we open doors for individuals who otherwise wouldn't have that. Our English and math reform programs have been nothing short of revolutionary to be able to bring that rate down in terms of how we evaluate students and we mainstream individuals and we put people into completely different hybrid classroom experiences and do a number of things using technology to be nationally leading best practice. And we've gone to a number of conferences and workshops where our faculty have really been able to lead and show what we're doing and have made great progress. This will continue as well. There's some big projects, and big projects are ones that I define as cutting across a lot of areas on our campus, ones that have great funding potential or realized funding, and have great outcomes and impacts in different areas. In this particular case, the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center, as we hear all of the time. Secretary of WEDC, after I did my presentation, he stood up and he said, one of the most important things that I've noticed about the work happening at UWM is that students who go there, whether they want to start a business on their own, it doesn't matter if they've had opportunities on entrepreneurship across all the majors, employers find them more valuable. Students think differently about creativity and innovation. I heard this from a School of Education student who graduated last year. She said, I knew I'd get a good education degree when I came to UWM. I didn't know that I'd also be able to start a business on my own. And she's got this great business where she's starting some food and treat type of business, and she left with a business plan and starting investors in this. The strategic enrollment management is huge because of how important it is. And this effort has been something that we've been working on for the last year and a half, and you've seen some of the highlights. Outstanding learning exemplified. I'd like to share with you one example. Last week, I was made aware of one of our accounting graduates from the Lubar School. He achieved one of the top scores nationally in the CPA exam, Certified Public Accounting. He won the Elijah Sells Award, and I congratulated him and thanked him for what he's done and his work. He responded to me and he said, "I'm delighted to help draw recognition to Lubar and UWM. Everything I needed to succeed was available to me in this endeavor. While study was a great amount of hard work, I could not have done it without the enthusiasm, efforts, and support of my professors in school. Thank you for your role in fostering such an environment." I'm happy to be in this role. It's a thrill and honor, but it's the work that's done by you who enable us to have this type of outcome. As I mentioned earlier, each of these areas has a dedicated group responsible. Our CMAC group, led by the provost and undergraduate admissions director, Katie Miota, are leading this particular effort. And there's a great number of individuals, and every year we've been having significant retreats and engaging a lot of the individuals on campus. But as I mentioned earlier, we need everybody's help for enrollment. On the research side, we've had a group working since 2011, led by Mark Harris. Mark is somebody I asked him the other day, are we at 100 meetings? Or he said, I don't even know, I've lost count, but it's certainly over 100 meetings since 2011. This group has persevered and really helped us put a framework, metrics, high priority action items that we've been implementing. And that's what targeted goals do. Some of the areas of focus: growing interdisciplinary problem-based research teams, drawing from existing strengths that we have, but then supplementing to really bring that glue together for increased funding potential for higher research impact and outcomes. Implementing tactics to attract and retain excellent grad students. What do I mean by that? Let's talk specifically here. We've allocated, last year, $692,000 in base budget. And I made a choice about this based on the advice of the research excellence team and leaders on our campus to go out and look at the critical need to make our stipends more competitive. And as resources are available, we're going to continue to do this. PA and TA appointments were included in the 1% campus-wide salary increase in 2014. I give a lot of credit to the schools and colleges that made that tough decision, because that's less money available for others on campus when we do that. But we know the importance of supporting graduate students. Competitive graduate stipends are a top priority for our campus. We have continued to implement tactics to attract and retain excellent graduate students in a lot of ways. We also, because these areas cut across so many parts of the campus, they represent a lot of funding opportunities and high visibility, high profile areas for us to reinforce, is strengthening health, water, STEM, and entrepreneurial fields. The big projects that are related to this include Freshwater University. Some of you are involved with and have heard about this, but this is a concept that our provost and system vice president, Jim Henderson, are leading to bring all of the water-related faculty, curriculum, research opportunities together so that we're not disparate, we're not uncoordinated, and we can achieve greater funding from UW system, we can achieve greater grant and greater industry support by working together. So that's kind of the high-level approach. Connected Systems Institute, if you were at Monday night's event or if you heard about it, read anything about some of the press coverage, we were able to make an announcement on Monday night for $1.7 million above and beyond the planning grant that we got. This is from Rockwell. And we also have several different commitments from other companies, and we'll be raising additional funds for this Connected Systems Institute that brings together the Internet of Things, brings together connectivity that builds on the strong foundations of a number of centers and institutes across our campus. This is something that we'll be continuing to raise funds, but it has Microsoft already on board with our alumni Satya Nadella, as well as the work that we have done extensively with Rockwell. So this will continue to be a very powerful, big project. Finally, with respect to community engagement, I'll hit some of the highlights. MCube you've been hearing about. I won't go into this in great detail other than to say, since we've talked last, We have achieved over $1 million in outside funding. One of the large pieces has come from the Herb Kohl Foundation, and we're delighted with that, but we've also achieved funding from other sources, and we continue to grow the Community Advisory Board. MCube has, as a goal, increased graduation and college readiness across the entire MPS, MATC, and UWM partnerships across a number of different areas. I was out at Innovation Campus less than an hour and a half ago, and our prototyping director said, we've got a great new MCube partnership. We're going to be having interns from Bradley Tech that'll come out and serve time, do work with us, hold the bars back, work with us, ultimately become employees, and this is at the 2-year level and ultimately going on to become engineers at the 4-year level. And he said, why weren't we doing this before? And I can tell you, every single time recently we had different events that involved 450 different faculty from across our institutions in math and English areas, and people walk away from these saying, this is incredible, these opportunities to share curriculum, to share advances. Why haven't we been doing this before? Every day we see those types of opportunities. And by the way, we've got 150 employees that are working on solving challenges for 143,000 students in public education across our 3 institutions. This is big. Joan Prince has been leading, with Scott Emmons, Dean of the Peck School of the Arts, the Social Entrepreneurship, Justice, and Equity Compact, SAJAC. This work has been aimed at especially low income, high poverty areas in Milwaukee, 53206 and other areas. One of the key outcomes has been 8 mini grants that have been solving a number of different issues. And these are important issues in terms of technology applications, low income individuals, helping homeless individuals find employment, looking at different opportunities when women come out of prison around housing, employment, and drug and alcohol abuse, and on and on. We also started a new program this summer called SAJAC Explorers, and that's what the picture is, helping link high school and college acculturation programs. We also received funding, I'm happy to report, last week, confirmed funding from Ray Cross for another 2 years of support for this program. So expect continued opportunities for mini grants and other activities. Our student work experiences continue to grow through co-ops, internships, field placement. We also have teacher and talent pipelines of critical importance. There's a growing teacher shortage that is the next wave of challenges that will affect us all, whether you have a family or not, in terms of the quality of education. And we know that depending on the study that you read, we're somewhere between 78,000 and 100,000 employees short today. With Foxconn coming, we will likely be in a much more challenged situation. Both existing employers are concerned about this, as well as those wanting to relocate here. So this talent pipeline issue is critically important for us to be ahead of. There's another way to look at this framework around outstanding learning environment, research excellence, and our engagement, and it's best told by participants. So,
being out of the educational setting for 11 plus years, I have a great appreciation for what I'm learning now that I'm not sure I would have had immediately following my bachelor's degree, without having the real life experiences on what the professors are truly getting at and what this means. So I received the Vera Zilber Scholarship. So with the financial realities of being a parent, working full time, graduate school is expensive. So it helps supplement those expenses and makes this more manageable for me and my family at this time. If I hadn't received the scholarship support, I probably wouldn't be here. About 2 years ago, the opportunity opened up at Children's Hospital to work with the Department of Population Health Management, which is why that passion for public health really started to bubble up in me. I just became exposed to the broad array of public health concerns and issues. My goal with now and into the future is to improve the health and well-being of children and families in our area. I'm committed to the Milwaukee area, and the Zilber School of Public Health has given me the tools that I need to help me meet that goal.
In some of my publications, they ask for the title, and I'm very proud to say that I use Patricia and Harvey Wilmette Professor. Patricia and Harvey Wilmette helped us establish the Center for Research on International Economics. In 2016, we were included among Research 1 or R1 universities. 1 out of 4 criteria is number of PhDs produced. They have to write their doctoral dissertation. They need somebody to lead them and show the way. In May 2017, I escorted my PhD student number 50 without philanthropy. Probably this will be impossible. So since Patricia and Harvey Wilmette helped us, I spend more time on doing research and working with my students. And I'm very grateful for that.
Our chapter of Engineers Without Borders travels to Guatemala annually. We go in and we implement water systems. Probably the best experience ever was when we saw water come out of the tap stands. We were all just so happy. We all just started drinking the spring water. It was the craziest moment ever, but it was just so blissful and so happy. Honestly, to know that your work actually works, that all your calculations, all the time dedicated, that all those calculations actually worked, and that you brought water to someone's house who have never seen running potable water before. It's one of the coolest experiences. We've gotten very large contributions from local companies here in Milwaukee. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to do this. We wouldn't be able to keep going back down there and building water systems. I'm beyond happy with the journey that I've taken. If I never won on any of these Guatemala trips, I don't know who I'd be. I really think it has changed every single person's life that's gone down there.
Well, Langston, Mosen, and Cassie tell our story better than I ever could. Let's hear it for them. Mosen, that's about you. It's not about everybody else. It's you. This is great. You did a wonderful job. I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. It's just remarkable. Number 50. How many are in the queue? 4. How about that? Look forward to seeing more of that. So, what's the big idea? Let me wrap this up. The big idea here, as we think about our summary of what I've been trying to say, is that our environment, the context, has changed. And sometimes we haven't even realized, sometimes change occurs in a manner that's so gradual that you don't realize it. And that's what I tried to do, is to impart some of the big environmental contextual factors that have changed. And sometimes they've been changing for a while, and we need to address them head on. And through the work of our Strategic Opportunities Work Group, and if you want a corny acronym, I'm really good at these. We have the new one. It's our Strategic Opportunities Action Plan. SOAP. So we run a clean university. Okay, so sorry, I know you can throw me off the stage in a moment, but this is it. And what I'd like to do is share with you in subsequent plenaries, subsequent communications, our progress on the indicators. But I also need your help. And that is when we have our CMAT work and their reporting out and their request for you to engage around everything. And it's not just about enrollments, it's about the quality of education experience, it's about preparation for life after graduation. It's really embracing that. Similarly, with research excellence, the different ways our schools and colleges are contributing is remarkable, especially given the leanness of our budget, the cuts that we've experienced. And then, of course, in community engagement. But to turn this around and to continue to build on this, we have to work in particular on the areas of the budget that we can control, because the state, like many other states, is not going to be that source of a lot of munificence. There's not going to be a lot of additional funds that would change us, that would get us back to 30 and 40 years ago, where 40 and 50% of our operating budget was from the state. That simply is not in our future. That was not one of the trends that I'm talking about. In fact, the trend on that line, if you look at this nationally, is continued decline for public support of higher education. That's our future. So we have to look at this in different ways. So it's in that context that I conclude with how we're doing the most important work, and it's the most noble work that a person can do. You're helping to shape the future of thousands of lives, of our communities, of our state, indeed, the world. I love the name of our campaign, Made in Milwaukee, Shaping the World. Nothing could be more true. I'm very fortunate to be able to see that and I think you are too, but sometimes we need to be a little distant and get outside of what we're doing and really hear that story from our alumni. You know, at UWM, as well-informed and educated citizens in a democracy, we're very fortunate. And that fortune levies upon us a calling, and that calling is to fight a good fight. And that fight is about access. It's about really opening up discovery and lifting up others who don't have the same opportunities that we've had. But we can't do it alone. We know that, and that's why I often tell our partners in any sector, whether it's in the nonprofit agencies, whether it's funding groups, whether it's businesses, education organizations, healthcare, our partnerships will increasingly form our future. It's with our partners, and we've been great at partnering, but we are going to have to increasingly do that. And I ask you to help find, exploit, do everything we can to really draw that in. So it's that way that we'll continue to have this impact. With our strategic opportunities, SOAP, with your continued effort and talents, we'll continue to build the momentum, the types of things we heard Monday and celebrated Monday around our capital campaign, the things that we're receiving in terms of some of those pieces in the positive budget direction, some of the one-time funding as well as some of the additional base funding. We have never had the percentage of funding increase in the UW system that we received in the last year, relative to Madison, relative to any other UW institution. This is the type of support. We need to continue to build on that. It's not enough to make up for the last decade, but it's the right direction, and we're going to continue to build on that. So I want to thank you for coming today, but more for all that you do, for all the things that you've opened doors for. And as Chancellor, it's my honor and pleasure to serve in this role. So thank you. I'm happy to take any questions if you have them. I guess we go on to the Faculty Senate meeting then. Okay? Thank you again. Okay.